Christine Baranski and Cynthia Nixon star in The Gilded Age on HBO. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. I want to start with a question for both of you. You've both done many period pieces on stage before, but not as many on film or TV, or if any at all. So I wanted to start by asking, what was it about this period piece in particular, this grand, lavish 1882 New York piece that drew you to The Gilded Age? And let's start with you, Christine.
Well, I think Cynthia would agree. One is not often offered period pieces of any kind, certainly to be considered a part of the project that takes place in the Gilded Age is very special. It's such a scenically rich period of time, and if you love Edith Wharton as I do, you would be, of course, utterly captivated by the idea of the costumes and the wigs and the manners. And I trained at Juilliard, where we did a lot of period plays, and I was never able to take that skill set and use it in anything that I ever did on TV. In TV and film, I was able to use that skill set in the theater. So when I heard Julian was, possibly going to write this, my heart jumped. I thought, oh, I want to be a part of that.
Cynthia, how about you?
Yes, I mean, I guess I have done a fair amount of period stuff on film, actually, when I think about it, including some, like Civil War kind of things. But certainly this period and this period in New York's history is really exciting to do this sort of, other than Edith Wharton and Henry James, it's a period that we don't see focused on a lot, and it has so much of, not only there are all these parallels between then and now, but so much of the roots of what New York would become and America would become were crystallized and came to be in the Gilded Age. But of course, working with Julian Fellowes and working with Ms. Baranski and working with all of the amazing, largely New York stage actors that we have to work with was a boon as well. And I was incredibly delighted by the character. I don't often get to play this kind of a character, and I feel like she's closer to me than a lot of characters that I play. So that was a real treat.
We're going to get into all of that, but I have to ask you both about Julian Fellowes first and foremost, because you've both worked with so many incredible writers on stage and screen: Tom Stoppard, Lillian Hellman, Robert and Michelle King, Michael Patrick King, so many wonderful writers. So what is it about Julian's writing in particular that is so unique and so rich? And what is it like to perform his words? Cynthia, let's start with you.
So I think two things about Julian's writing. One is just the scope of it. It's almost Dickensian, how many vivid characters there are and how many threads of plot there are interwoven. And they always cross each other and in surprising and inventive ways. But I think also, and I didn't fully grasp this until I started, shooting The Gilded Age. As a viewer of Downton Abbey or Gosford Park or other things like that, I've really enjoyed his writing, but I didn't quite realize how specifically it is written for actors. Just so of course a lot of it is very witty. Christine has so many very witty lines, but also it's very compact and dense, and it goes right to the heart of the emotion. And I feel like the emotion is easy to access as an actor when you're reading Julian's lines, but also, as a viewer of Downton Abbey, I thought, why am I so invested in these characters? And he just has a way of writing not only the kind of the big picture of the plot, but the specific of the line that just hits you right in the heart.
I think he's our possibly foremost film historian. He does clearly does vast amounts of research. Look how he revealed the Edwardian age to everyone, but particularly American audiences. And now he's revealing a period of American history that most Americans don't really know about. one of the reasons we don't see the Gilded Age on film is because it's too costly to produce anything. I mean, Scorsese did it in Age of Innocence, but to recreate that period. But Julian, clearly, because first of all, he is a great lover of Edith Wharton and of that period in American history. But I mean, this is vast amounts of research that he does to tell, this story. There's the Russell household, and then the Brooke household, and then there's the upstairs and downstairs. And as Cynthia said, all of these plot lines are the dynamics and the tension between the classes and the relationships. They're all based on, characters and a kind of history that he's done tremendous amount of unearthing. And that's to bring characters to life in such a remote part of American history is, I think, just a supreme achievement. I totally trust him that when he writes Cynthia and my character, that he really, you ask him a question and he can tell you exactly what that moment or what those traditions or what the custom was, whatever. He's done a lot of work.
Yeah, Christine, Cynthia just mentioned you have so many wonderfully witty lines, and Agnes is such a witty and urbane and hilariously rigid character. But I wanted to ask you too, we learn kind of throughout the season some of the kind of dark past that Agnes has suffered through and experienced. Just talk about kind of finding the balance of the character, because she is hysterical, but also you bring so much nuance to the role.
Well, I don't think of her as witty. I don't start from that place as an actor. Yes, it's Julian Fellowes, and yes, he writes that particular kind of lady extremely well. But you when you're doing your actor's work and all, you put that behind you. You don't say, "Oh, goody, here comes this wonderful line that I'm about to say." That's not where your focus is. I think a lot of her humor and that acerbic quality, she had a tough life, as women did back then. She and her sister had somewhat of a charmed life in Pennsylvania and beloved parents, and then their brother squandered the family fortune, and both women were left very vulnerable, and Agnes made a big decision to marry a man she did not love, perhaps grew to have affection for, but it was, one of those marriages that you had to say yes in order to save yourself, and in the process she also saved her sister. But I think he was a dark man. It was not an easy marriage, and she had one child, and I think that was difficult. And these women really did have hard lives. Even if they had great clothes and beautiful houses, they had to make a lot of sacrifices. And I think Agnes is tough, and she's a realist, and she calls it, she tells it like it is. And when she gives warnings to her niece, it's based on, trust me, I know this. I don't want to see you hurt, or trust me, you really need to follow this set of rules or you're going to be left behind. You cannot find yourself at the age of 34 unmarried. She's a pragmatist and a realist in comparison to her sister. And she's tough on her sister, and she feels she has to take care of her sister, but her sister also takes care of Agnes, as we will see.
Yeah, let's dig into Ada, Cynthia, because she's so light and joyous, but she's also had some disappointment in her life as well. And in that way, the role reminds me in some sense of Birdie from The Little Foxes that you did so fabulously on stage. So I just wanted to ask you, to talk about the character, but also talk about, did doing that show help you find this character when you got these scripts and saw any similarities in the roles?
I mean, I think that it was Michael Engler seeing me in that play that made him think of me for this role. I of course, I see the similarities, but of course I also see the great differences in that. I think that Birdie, first of all, Bertie is an alcoholic, and Bertie is married to a man who hits her, and Bertie has a son, but loathes him, and is, as much as she tries to be bright and chipper, she is miserable. There is no depth to the daily misery that she endures. Whereas Ada has had sadness and disappointment in her life. It's sort of kind of a life that didn't really happen, as opposed to a life filled with pain and anguish and abuse. And I think that Ada, as much as Bertie tries to be an optimist, I think Ada actually is an optimist. And I think, I heard someone say recently that, the number one thing that they've found that makes for a quote unquote happy person is gratitude, not how much you have or how much power you have or how much freedom you have or how much security you have. Whatever the amounts of those things that you have, the thing that they've discovered makes you happy is being grateful for whatever your life is. And I think that Ada certainly falls into that. I think her gratitude to not only to Agnes, but to life itself kind of knows no bounds.
Some of my favorite scenes of yours, Cynthia, are when Ada is having these kind of heart-to-heart conversations with Marian, her niece, in a way that, and connects with Marian in a way that a lot of characters don't. What is it about Ada that you think is able to get through to Marian? And talk about working with Louisa Jacobson.
So I think that, Ada never had children, and she would have so loved to have them. And I think not only that, but I think she sees so much of herself in Marian, a young woman adrift at a time when the trajectory of her life is being decided. And, Ada feels that kind of, there was Agnes sort of making sure they didn't starve and weren't homeless, but there was nobody really looking out for Ada and seeing to her happiness, marital or otherwise. And so I think she really has taken very strongly to this job, that it is her job to Agnes feels that in a different way. Both women, I think, are very intent on guiding Marian and helping her. And I just love Louisa. I'm just thoroughly enchanted by her, and so it makes it very easy to care about her and want to be her her aunt, whether biological or not.
Christine, similar question. Some of my favorite scenes of yours are opposite Danae Benton as Peggy. Agnes and Peggy are such an endearing pairing. And she admires her so much too. So I just wanted to ask you, what is it about Peggy that Agnes really seems to latch onto? Because at the end of the season, when Agnes has to kind of bid her farewell, it's a very moving and emotional scene. And just talk about working with Danae as well.
Well, I think that Agnes is like Ada, rather surprised at this young woman, who's windblown and comes in. We expected Marian to arrive, but we did not expect this young, very attractive Black woman to arrive. And as her story unfolds in that first scene, her manners, she's well-spoken, she's utterly polite, and when she writes something down and her address down, and I look at her handwriting and say, where did you learn to write like this? We discover that she is, in fact, a well-educated young woman. And I think that Agnes appreciates anyone who, has to pick herself up by the bootstraps and make her way. And I think Agnes recognizes that this young woman will have it a great deal harder than her niece. Her niece is walking into a townhouse and will be given social connections and a beautiful wardrobe, and will have to be smart enough to, play the game and have a husband. But that this young, ambitious, lovely woman will have it so much more difficult. And when I am, it's established that Agnes doesn't much like to do all her correspondence and all. She's a bit of a social curmudgeon at this point in her life. So there's, you know, there's Peggy who's willing to do her letters and all that. And it establishes this relationship that's it's utterly delightful to me, because, you know, when you play a character as tough as Agnes, you look for those ways that will show the softer aspects, or perhaps the more empathetic aspects of the character. And that's one of the great joys of playing somebody so hard and tough, is that when they do soften, the audience is like, oh, I see how she may be such a bitch. But Danae is a walking light bulb. I just think she's extraordinary. She just she really is. She's luminous, and she's highly intelligent actress, and very committed to bringing the story of her own character and her family's history. And she really, to her credit, went to the HBO execs and said, you know, you have to write, you can't just simplify this story, and are you aware, and can we make this richer? So I think she's a young actress with a tremendous future.
And speaking of Danae and Cynthia, you mentioned this earlier, just the incredible ensemble on this show, and in every corner. I mean, it's truly an extraordinary group with so many Tony nominations and so many Tonys, the two of you included. I just wanted to ask both of you, you know, how does that change the feel on a film set? Because it really is like a repertory company of actors here. You know, does it change the way, you know, that feels versus another TV series or a film that you've done? Christine, we'll start with you.
Well, I'll tell you, it just makes it collegial and easy, because on any given day, you're playing opposite somebody with whom you did a play, a reading, a long Broadway run. Cynthia and I mean, I was Cynthia's mother, you know, in 1984. We'll start there. But on any given day, there's these marvelous character actors and actresses. And if you haven't worked with them, then you've seen their work and admire their work. So Nathan Lane, I mean, please, I have such a history with Nathan. It's totally delightful. And I think when you're delighted and there's humor and you're joking about, you've done this play and oh my, there's gossip and there's frivolity, it makes for a lovely bonding. It makes for a more relaxed set.
Cynthia?
Yes, I think it's funny. I watched, and I'm watching again this season, whenever we have a new person come on who might have credits as long as their arm and Tonys to boot and other awards to boot, the first day or two is sort of nerve-wracking, because it just feels like the kind of the stakes are higher. It feels a little bit like the Olympics or something. But very quickly, everybody just relaxes in. But I think for all of us, you know, myself included, like the very first day was sort of nerve-wracking, because you're acting with the best. And even though you might have known them for years, maybe, and admired them, you know, maybe you've never acted with them before, and it feels a little bit like the Olympics.
Cynthia Nixon and Christine Baranski, congratulations on the first season of The Gilded Age. We cannot wait to see the second season. I know you're in production now. And thanks so much for talking to Gold Derby today.
Thank you, David. Bye, Cyn.